You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Feel like who art Ed?
We'll try to slice it.
Who art is Mr. Wood art Ed me?
Good. Either way, it's ambiguous. It works on so many levels.
I know.
That's off to a great start.
Welcome to Who Arted, weekly art history for all ages. I'm your host, Kyle Wood, and today we're looking at Saloua Raouda Choucair. Now, she was a true pioneer of abstract art who, despite being largely overlooked during her lifetime, has finally been recognized as a major figure in modern art history. Saloua Raouda Choucair was born in 1916 in Beirut, a city that at that time was still under Ottoman rule. It was a world on the cusp of immense change, a world about to be reshaped by World War I and the subsequent redrawing of national borders. This was the world that shaped Choucair's early life and, in many ways, her artistic sensibility. Now, her family was progressive, valuing education and intellectual pursuits. This was crucial as Choucair displayed an early interest in art, a passion that wasn't always encouraged for women of her time. She also studied natural sciences at the Junior College for Women, the forerunner to Beirut's Lebanese American University, but her heart was set on painting. It's said that as a young woman, she would often copy the paintings from art books. Her initial teacher was a Lebanese landscape painter, Omar Ansi. And he was the one who first suggested she study in Paris. He recognized her talent and a passion for art, but another Lebanese artist she studied under, Mustafa Farouk, was skeptical. He told her frankly that she would not succeed in Paris. Thankfully, she persisted. And one thing I found interesting while doing my research for this episode was that her teachers had been influenced by Western artists. I mean, both had adopted Impressionist and Realist styles. Choucair herself would go to Paris and study. But from what I read, it was actually a trip to Egypt in 1943 that helped shape her conceptions of art. On that trip, she became fascinated with Islamic art and architecture, solidifying her belief that Arab artists had achieved a purity of expression. She felt they had distilled art to its essence, moving beyond the Western artistic traditions that had dominated since the ancient Greeks. 1947 saw a major milestone in Choucair's career. She had her first solo exhibition in Beirut, becoming one of the first to hold an exhibition of abstract art in Lebanon. However, it was met with confusion and misunderstanding. Modern abstract pieces may have been widely accepted in Europe and the West more broadly by the mid-20th century, but it was out of line with artistic traditions and practices that were prevalent in Beirut at that time. The audience didn't understand what they were seeing. She would later describe it saying, quote, "When I had my first exhibition in 1947 at the Arab Cultural Gallery in Beirut, people used to come up to me and ask me, 'Where is the painting?' They just saw lines, they saw colors, they couldn't understand that this is what a painting is," end quote. Undeterred, Choucair was determined to deepen her understanding of abstraction. So in 1948, she traveled to Paris, which was the center of the modern art world and the avant-garde at that time. She enrolled at the prestigious École des Beaux-Arts and studied in the studio of Fernand Léger, a giant of modern art. I imagine it must have been both exhilarating and nerve-wracking to be immersed in that vibrant, experimental art scene of post-war Paris. It was an eye-opener. She was exposed to Cubism, Constructivism, and other avant-garde movements. Choucair described this period as a revelation, saying, quote, "In Paris, I discovered that art is not just about representing what you see, but about expressing an inner vision, a concept," end quote. She realized that the abstraction she had already been working on before her arrival was a much bigger movement in the West. But her time in Paris wasn't just about absorbing Western influences. In an interview later in life, Choucair recounted how a critic said that her work had a European influence, but she pushed back, saying that it was a universal influence, that the life experiences that shaped her art were experienced by everyone in the world. Choucair was also deeply interested in Islamic art and architecture. She saw a connection between the geometric patterns and abstract principles of Islamic art and the modern art movements that she was encountering. And I think that's a really important point about her work. She wasn't simply adopting Western styles. She was synthesizing them with her own cultural heritage. Choucair returned to Beirut in 1951, bringing with her a unique artistic vocabulary that blended the Parisian experiences with her deep appreciation for Islamic art. She began creating works that were bold and fresh. Her paintings and sculptures were characterized by geometric forms, interlocking shapes, and a sense of dynamic movement. She wasn't interested in representing reality. She was interested in exploring the underlying structures of existence. Choucair worked tirelessly, experimenting with different materials and techniques. She created paintings, sculptures, jewelry, textiles, even furniture. And she was not content to be limited to one particular medium and refused to be confined by traditional boundaries. She was fascinated by the concept of infinity, and many of her works, especially her sculptures, seem to suggest infinite possibilities of form and arrangement. Like the modular sculptures that she would describe as poems, as they could be rearranged and interpreted in different collections or as individual pieces. Now, despite her innovative work, recognition remained elusive. She faced numerous challenges, including not just a lack of understanding from the local art scene. I mean, there was a civil war. Some of her work, like one of her paintings I saw was displayed, it actually had broken bits of glass and chunks missing from when a detonation had happened near her apartment and the window was blown out. There was political turmoil plaguing Lebanon for much of the 20th century. There were times she couldn't even afford art supplies, but she never gave up on her art. She was driven by an inner necessity to express herself through abstract forms, regardless of external validation. She said, quote, "I never thought about whether people would like my work or not. I just had to create." End quote. It wasn't until later in life that she finally began to receive the recognition she deserved. In 2013, at the age of 97, she had a major retrospective at the Tate Modern in London. This was a watershed moment, not just for Choucair, but for the entire field of Arab modern art. Suddenly, the world was paying attention to the remarkable artist who had been working in relative obscurity for decades. Saloua Raouda Choucair passed away in 2017 at the age of 100, leaving behind a rich and complex body of work that continues to inspire and challenge us today. Her story is a reminder that true artistic innovation often comes from the margins, from those who dare to challenge conventions and forge their own paths. Her unwavering commitment to her vision, her unique synthesis of Eastern and Western influences, and her pioneering spirit make her a truly remarkable figure in the history of modern art. Now, after a short break, I want to take a look at a specific work of hers, Interform, from 1960. The piece I want to focus on today is called Interform. And of course, you can see an image of the work if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or anywhere else supporting episode-specific cover art. If you're listening on a platform that allows ratings, I always do appreciate a kind rating or review to help others discover the show. Now, Interform is a relatively small sculpture made of interlocking pieces of wood. A series of curved and angular forms carefully fitted together to create a dynamic three-dimensional composition. The pieces are made of polished wood, each one meticulously crafted and joined to the others. There are no extraneous details, no decorative elements. The beauty of the sculpture lies in its pure form and interplay of the constituent parts. Interform has this sense of contained energy. The pieces seem to push and pull against each other, creating a feeling of tension and release. It's as if the sculpture could burst apart, but it's also held together by something, a delicate balance of opposing forces. This is a recurring theme in Choucair's work. The exploration of duality, of opposing forces held in equilibrium. The title, Interform, is also significant. Let's start by just defining terms. Inter as a prefix would suggest between or among, and form is, of course, one of the elements of art. A form is the configuration of something, and basically in art, when we talk about forms, we're talking about three-dimensional objects or the illusion of three dimensions if it's a two-dimensional work. The title Interform suggests a dialogue between forms, a conversation between the different parts of the sculpture. Each piece is an individual entity, yet it only achieves its full meaning in relation to other pieces. They're interdependent, interconnected. The negative spaces, the white space or non-present element, is just as important as what she connects to the form itself. In some ways, it's similar to the concept of the poem sculptures that Choucair championed. She created a series of modular sculptures she called poems, which could connect in different ways and be read either individually or as a group. Interform also showcases Choucair's fascination with Islamic art and architecture. The intricate interlocking forms are reminiscent of the geometric patterns in traditional Islamic design. Think of the elaborate mosaics that adorn mosques and palaces throughout the Islamic world. These patterns are not merely decorative. They're expressions of deep philosophical and spiritual understanding of the universe. They represent the infinite, the interconnectedness of all things. Choucair saw these same principles at play in modern abstract art. Of course, with modern abstract pieces, there are always multiple interpretations. Some look at Interform through the lens of mathematics and geometry. Choucair was deeply interested in these fields, and she saw them as fundamental to her artistic practice. The precise angles, the carefully calculated curves, the overall structure of the sculpture, all of these elements suggest a mathematical mind at work. But this is not cold, sterile mathematics. It's soft, warm, even playful. When you look at Interform, you can almost see the principles in action, the way different forms relate to each other according to precise ratios and proportions. Many artists have systematic approaches to composition. A very basic example would be the rule of thirds, and for anyone not familiar with that guideline, you can very quickly up your photo game by imagining a tic-tac-toe grid on the viewfinder. Many devices today actually even have an option to overlay a grid like that to help you. The rule of thirds says that instead of placing the focal point in the center square, place that focal point at an intersection of those lines 1/3 of the way from the edges. That asymmetrical balance will make the photo a little more active and dynamic. Anyways, back to Interform. The play with angles has this mix of order and chaos that feels too precise to be random. It's as if Choucair is revealing the hidden mathematical order that underlies the universe. It suggests that underneath the apparent chaos of the world, there's a deeper order, a fundamental structure that can be grasped through the language of geometry. For many modern abstract artists, the goal was to distill art to its fundamental elements and get down to something deeper, expressing ideas and emotions that are timeless and universal. For some, it might be driven by personal self-expression, philosophy, or religion. Choucair said, quote, "All the rules that I apply are derived from the Islamic religion and from Islamic geometric design," end quote. So I don't think it would be too much of a stretch to say these abstractions hint at her deeply held beliefs about the nature of life, the world, and the cosmos. And the beauty of the sculpture, though, is Interform is also just a beautiful sculpture. It's a testament to Choucair's skill as a sculptor. The craftsmanship is impeccable. Each piece of wood is perfectly shaped and finished, and the way they fit together is a marvel of precision engineering. It's clear that Choucair was not just a conceptual artist, she was also a master craftswoman who took great pride in the physical act of creation. Interform is a powerful and evocative work of art that encapsulates many of the key themes and ideas that defined Saloua Raouda Choucair. It's a work that rewards close looking, a work that invites us to contemplate the nature of form, the relationship between the part and the whole, and the hidden connections between art, mathematics, and the cosmos. This concludes this week's episode of Who Arted, part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. If you found this tolerable, please leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. You can find images of the work being discussed this week and every week on social media at Who Arted Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and of course on the website whoartedpodcast.com. Podcast done.